Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Dungeon Inn. This is the workshop in a slightly different form. I don't know exactly what I'm going to call this yet. It might just be a workshop quickie, or I don't know, I just bit my tongue. A quick build or something like that. Don't really know. I was actually going to be putting out a different video this week, another workshop. It's a workshop video on shamans and the shaman class in 5th edition, looking at some homebrews and things like that, which is going to be kind of cool. But I'm going to push that back a little bit, and we're releasing this instead because with all the new Unearthed Arcanas coming out, I thought, hey, it'd be pretty cool to look at some of them because they're actually really interesting, and, you know, there's some stuff we could talk about when it comes to the future of the game, what wizards might be doing next, and talking about design concepts and stuff like that, which, you know, is what the workshop's all about. The other reason that I decided to take a look at these subclasses is because they're of particular interest to me due to me running Divara. It's the campaign or the stream we run on this channel, which, if you guys aren't watching it, you know, give it a look. And in that, there are a lot of far realmy, alien, mind-bending things. It's going to be a big theme of the campaign, and it's already come up a couple of times. So seeing what wizards can add to that aesthetic is of particular interest to me. So yeah, this is going to be just a little bit more freeform. It's going to just involve me basically going through what I think of the Unearthed Arcanas and just scrolling through, giving general feedback, rather than like a really in-depth analysis like I've done previously on the workshop and things like that. So this week, the Unearthed Arcana they released is a subclass for the Sorcerer and the Warlock, both themed around aberrations, psionics, and, you know, deep sea creepy crawly creatures, as well as a new psionic-based cantrip. So clearly, Scions are on the mind, which might indicate Dark Sun coming up sometime soon. After the last Unearthed Arcana that came out, which was the Fey Barbarian and the Astral Monk, which I will, if you guys like this video, let me know down in the comments, and I might do another video basically of the same format going through those, because I actually really like those subclasses and I've got a lot to talk about them with, but I just missed the opportunity to do them. Those made me really think that, hey, maybe they are pivoting towards Planescape, because Astral Monk, Fey Barbarian, they're both wild, chaotic, very out there, especially the Astral Monk, very out there ideas that, you know, would suit the Planescape setting well. But these seem to be looking more at moving towards a more psionic feel, which is, look, not bad. I like psionics. I think they're a really cool thing for the game. It's just not Planescape. Because it's not Planescape, I just sort of have to dislike it a little bit out of principle. So first off, let's look at the Aberrant Mind subclass of Sorcerer. Alien influence has wrapped its tendrils around you, warping both your body and your mind. Perhaps a psychic splinter is lodged into the psyche after suffering domination by Aberrant. Basically, you've been warped by some kind of psionic creature or aberration. Aboleths, beholders, krakens, whatever it might be, or even potentially some sort of Cthulhu-like creature. Although it doesn't specifically call it out, it does mention the far realm in the flavor text here. I could see an aberrant mind sorcerer emerging from a very Lovecraftian situation. Your character bears witness to something that is so twisted and so beyond the normal conception of reality that their mind is bent and they become an aberrant mind, which is, rather than, you know, being directly influenced by a monster within the game world. I think that's a more interesting take, but, you know, that's my personal thing. I really like the unique disturbance little side block where they talk about just how warped your character is. That's normal people, normal inhabitants of the world are just turned off from them. Things like how detect thoughts, or I'd argue even maybe detect magic, comes up with just weird responses that unnerves everyone around you. Both these subclasses aren't necessarily evil, but definitely have a more malicious tint to them. But you can still use them in an adventuring party. I wouldn't say they're like the Oathbreaker Paladin or the Death Cleric or something where they have to be evil. Yeah, so looking up at their first level ability, that's Invasive Thoughts. So it's a first. Also, I like this little subtitle thing. They said they were testing it out. I think it's good. It doesn't really add or take away much, but I guess it kind of helps out a bit when you're just like skimming a page. I'm not sure if they'll end up adding it to the final book or not, but yeah. Anyway, Invasive Thoughts. So this is giving you a telepathy ability at first level. you can magically create a link with one creature you can see within 30 feet of you. Until that link ends, you can telepathically speak to the target through the link, and if it can understand at least one language, it can speak telepathically to you. Link lasts for 10 minutes, and it ends early if you're incapacitated or you die, or if you use another bonus action to break the link or establish this link with a different creature. So first off, I looked at this and I thought it was like a weaker version of the Great Old One Warlock's mind thing. And what's it called? Actually, I've got my books here. Awakened Mind. The more I looked at it, the more I realized that this actually has a couple of things that are different to it. So with the Great Old One Warlock's Awakened Mind, you can telepathically communicate with all creatures within 30 feet of you so long as they share a language, which obviously at first I thought meant it was better, because you can communicate with all these creatures rather than just the one. But reading more carefully into the abilities, this has a couple of things that the Awakened Mind doesn't. While it's only one creature, this creature can actually respond back to you. So you can have a conversation with the single creature you have bound to, or you've got a link to, with Invasive Thoughts. Whether with Awakened Mind, you can talk to other creatures, i.e. you can talk to your party telepathically, but they can't respond to you. The other thing is that you can only, with the Awakened Minds, you can only telepathically communicate with them while they're within 30 feet of you. And while the initial link with Invasive Thoughts needs to be within 30 feet of you, that creature can then wander as far as it wants in the 10 minutes, and you can still telepathically communicate with it. So if you've got a rogue or a ranger who wants to scout ahead, this could be a very useful ability for keeping contact with them. Which means it's kind of got its own unique niche that I didn't initially thought it had, separate to the Awakened Mind. But even despite that, it is a very similar ability. Like, you get a telepathic connection with creatures around you. It's a very psionic thing. I'm not arguing that it doesn't make sense for it. It just is, a very similar ability. So let's see what else they've got. They've got Psionic Spells. So when it comes to Sorcerer spells, in a lot of the Sorcerer Unearthed Arcanas, they've been very liberal with giving out the spells, but when it comes to actually publishing those subclasses, they've cut back. So we saw the Divine Sol and the Storm Sorcerer and the Shadow Sorcerer and other Sorcerer subclasses before they came out as Xanathars getting a whole bunch of Psionic spells just normal spells, like the Aberrant Mind gets Psionic spells. But they didn't actually get it when it came to the official release, which, that really annoyed me, especially with like the Storm Sorcerer, because you need things like Core Lightning to feel like a Storm Sorcerer, or like Storm Sphere. There are some really cool spells that the Storm Sorcerer needs, in my opinion, to hit that flavor. The only sorcerer out of those that actually ended up getting spells was the Divine Sol Sorcerer, or Favored Soul, I can't remember what they ended up calling it, I'm pretty sure it was Divine Soul, which ended up getting one first level spell, depending on whether you were good or lawful or whatever. And that was it. So it's interesting that they're going back to giving a whole bunch of psionic spells to this class when they've moved away from it. And personally, I think they're probably giving too many. So for my calculations, if you're at 9th level, you've gained an extra 10 spells, and a sorcerer at 9th level, when they get the last of their spells, only knows 10 spells. So essentially, the Psionic subclass is getting twice the amount of spells known as every other sorcerer. And that's a bit much, if I'm being honest. Like, I'm definitely for sorcerers getting more spells, but getting this many spells is, a bit excess. Unless, of course, you do what I do, which is you homebrew and house rule that all sorcerer subclasses get more spells, because that pretty much just puts every other sorcerer subclass on par with this one. I think it's a much more fair way to run the sorcerer. I think their spells known don't need to be as limiting as they are. The metamagic options that they get don't make up for their lack of spells known. So if you run a sorcerer in your campaign, I think you should be giving them extra spells known depending on what subclass they pick, regardless of that subclass. But anyway, the spells that they get are pretty decent and all make sense. So I don't really have an issue with this ability, especially because of the home change I run anyway. But if you don't run that home change, this makes this sorcerer significantly more powerful. It's a big thing to take note of. They also get a first level ability, which is a lot. It's more than any other sorcerer subclass, I believe, from memory. But again, if you add the extra spells as like an extra feature that every sorcerer gets at first level, it puts this in line with every other sorcerer subclass. But this third ability is called Warped Being, which gives you an AC of 13 plus your dex modifier when you're not wearing armor. So it's like a mage armor, or it's like the Draconic Sorcerer's Scales. This is the ability that I really don't like of this sorcerer. I think that it it's got the most tenuous connection to the flavor of the class as a whole. I know it goes through it pretty well and describes it. You might have a coating of viscous slime, tough hide, scales, or an invisible psionic barrier, which, is pretty cool and true, but I just think it's so boring to just give the class a 13 plus dexterity modifier while you're not wearing armor. I think you could do something different that's much more interesting, especially because while the telepathy ability of Invasive Thoughts is unique, it's still very similar to what already exists with the old one Warlock. So I think this class, to really distinguish itself, should have a different first level ability that is more unique to it, be it maybe like you can do some synaptic damage when you take a hit, or I think a mirror image like effect would be really cool by creating like illusionary forms of yourself. Something else that's just more interesting than like a mage armor / weakened version of the Draconic Sorcerer's scaled hide, whatever that ability's called. Especially because this sort of encourages you to wade into melee, and psionics have a bit of a history, a reputation of being not glass cannons, but being frail. Like, your power of the mind comes at the cost of physical frailty, so getting something that increases your armor class is, goes a bit against that. Again, it's not a big deal. It's not like a broken ability or anything, but I think these 3 first level abilities together, while, cool and do to a degree make sense, it could do more. Alright, scrolling down. AC calculations don't stack. That's, we should all know that by now, but it's good they keep putting it there. Let's zoom back in and look at Psionic Sorcery, so the 6th level Aberrant Mind feature. So I think from this point on, the subclass really comes into its own. The first level of abilities are, cool, but this is where it gets really good. So Psionic Sorcery allows you to cast your Psionic spell slots, which is the list of expanded spells up here. So you can cast these psionic spells using your sorcerer points, which is a really cool mechanic. Pretty much every sorcerer subclass gets a new way to spend their sorcery points when it comes to 6th level. So this falls into alignment with that pattern set. And I think this is a cool way to do it. And when you let's not forget that when you spend your sorcery points to cast these spells, you require no components. I.e., you're casting it as a psionic. You're not saying, you're not doing, you're not waving your hands or anything. It just happens, which is something that has been a hallmark of psionics since their inception. I think this is a really cool ability. I don't think it's too powerful because, you've only got a certain amount of sorcery points, so you've only got 6 at the level where you get this. So sure, you can cast some spells that will have no components, but if you do, you can't use your meta magic options, you can't use a whole bunch of other things. It scales off your sorcery points fine. And I think, it's really thematic and really cool. This also probably explains why they've got more spells known in their list than the other subclasses, because they wanted to make the most of the Psionic Sorcery feature by giving you a lot of options for it. So it'll be interesting to see if they keep that in later versions of the class, or if they change its ability, or if they just keep the ability, but change the amount of spells you can cast with it. Psychic defenses, you get at 6th level. At 6th level, you have resistance to psychic damage, and you have advantage on saving throws against being charmed or frightened. This is pretty fair. Resistance to psychic damage doesn't really come up that much, but it makes sense for your character. And as advantage on saving throws against being charmed and frightened is just a cool thing to have. Again, it's the strength of the mind, and it's not immunity like the paladins get though, which I'm not sure how I feel about that, because on the one hand, if you're a aberrant mind or psionic based class, you should have you should be really resistant to mental effects, and yet a paladin can just be fuck paladins, man. Just fuck paladins. Now, their 14th level ability is called Revelation in Flesh, and this is where I think the subclass gets really cool, really thematic. So Psychic Defenses and Psionic Sorcery were really cool abilities that added to the Psionic sense, but Revelation in the Flesh gives you some truly unique visual stuff to play with. So at 14th level, you can unleash the true aberrant truth hidden within your flesh. As a bonus action, you can spend 1 or more sorcery points to magically transform your body for a minute, and you can take on multiple of these various forms. So you could have a swimming speed and a fly speed all at once. I'll quickly go through them. You gain a swimming speed equal to your walking speed and the ability to breathe water. You gain a flying speed and can hover, and your skin glistens with mucus. I think that's a little weird for flying. I would have thought it would be like your eyes glow and then you like raise from the ground, like levitate or something, but your body, along with any equipment you're wearing or carrying, becomes slimy and pliable, and you can squeeze through spaces like an ooze. I was actually in the process of building a monk ooze-based subclass about a week or so before this came out, and had an ability very similar to this, which is, just a side note. And then finally, your eyes turn black and become writhing with sensory tendrils, which is fucking weird. And you're aware of the location of any hidden or invisible creature within 60 feet of you. So those are all some really unique abilities, and the fact that you've got access to all of them and can choose which ones you need depending on the situation gives you a lot of versatility. And they all have their unique and creepy flavor, whether it's growing gills in order to swim through the water, whether or not, it's having a psionic hovering levitation ability, being able to turn into ooze. It really makes members of your party and people around you look at you and go, what is that dude's deal? What the fuck happened to them? The other thing I do like about this subclass is that on the one hand, I think its flavor... On the one hand, I think its flavor is a little mixed, because it seems to want to be a psionic-based sorcerer, but at the same time has all these references to specific to aberration creatures like beholders and mind flayers and stuff. And I think you can go either way. I think the flavor text does a good job at being like, you could describe this as your mental powers doing this, or you could describe this as your body being warped by aliens, essentially. It gives you a lot of room to manipulate the flavor per your character, which is good. I've seen a lot of people really liking the flavor of this subclass. I'm like, I personally prefer the Warlock. I just think it's a more succinct flavored subclass rather than this, but, each their own. I think that what this class does really well is that it starts off with you being your character, being, this, like, he's a little weird. Say the other members of your party come up to you and are like, this dude's a little weird. He can speak to us in our minds. That's, it's not that different, and he's got some creepy spells. Maybe he's, as he said, with the warped being, his skin is covered in slime, or he's just got scales all over her, which is pretty weird. But by the time you get to 14th level, you are, turning into slime and sliding under doors. You are having black eyeballs with writhing tentacles or worms emerging from them, sensing around. That's creepy as fuck, and that transition throughout the course of a campaign pretty much tells its own story, and I think that's something Wizards is really going for. They're trying to tell a story through every subclass that they make, and I think they really hit the mark here. Their final ability is Warp Reality, which is it's 18th level, and it's a teleport-based ability where you can grab any number of creatures, is it? Transport... Other creatures in this aura find it as difficult terrain. Okay, so first off, you create this aura of difficult terrain within 20 feet of you. It could be psychic energy, an amoebic gel, or ephemeral parasites. As I said, very versatile flavor here. You can really describe it however you want, as long as it's creepy and alien psionic-y. And creatures that start their turn in take 2d10 damage, which dishes out over the course of a minute a pretty decent amount of damage of a type that not a lot of creatures resist. But as a bonus action, you can end it early, and if you do, you can teleport any number of creatures, you and any number of creatures, to any location within a mile of you. Each creature must appear within 20 feet of you, and if the creature is unwilling, it can make a charisma save, which again is a fairly weak save. It's interesting it's charisma, not intelligence. I think both make sense, and a lot of teleportation effects are charisma, a force of personality to resist it. But a lot of psionics use intelligence saves for things, so... This to me, like, when I read this, I think teleport them 1 mile in the air, and then just let them drop. So teleport up, you cast fly on yourself, and assuming those other creatures can't fly, they're gonna plummet to the earth and die. They're gonna take the maximum 20d6 or whatever it is. Some people overrule that, which make this ability really powerful. But it is a once per long rest thing. So you could cheese some encounters with it, but also it's 18th level ability. I'm totally fine with that, and I think it is really cool being able to create this psychic aura around you is something that, you know, is unique to a Scion and they're sort of really known for. Okay, so yeah, all up, I like the Aberrant Mind subclass. I think that its flavor could be narrowed down a bit. It seems to be... Initially, I thought its flavor was really mismatched, sometimes being tied to psionics, sometimes being tied to like aberrations and creatures and things. I think they're two separate things. But the class, as I read through it, has been very versatile with its flavor, and it gives you a lot of opportunity to describe these abilities however you want them for your character. If you wanted to play just a cut and dry psionic character, so like you were born with psionic abilities innate to your family or something, then instead of narrating the abilities as being really creepy or unusual, you can just have your eyes glow, be surrounded with like purple magic, and the abilities still function fine, the features function fine. Revelation in the Flesh might be the only one which could be a little bit weird because you're growing gills and turning into slime and stuff like that. But I think you can still find ways to reflavor that. But if you did want to lean into the aberration, tainted, warped thing, so I think it finds a good medium between the two, and each individual player or character can decide how their abilities manifest. So the second subclass is a Warlock subclass called Lurker in the Deep, and this looks like it's the updated version of the Kraken patron that Mike Wells created about a year ago on his Happy Fun Hour, it's a subclass that I really liked, so I'm really glad to see it. I don't know what's happening with my throat this stream. And let's see how it's changed and updated. I can't really remember it all that much off the top of my head, and I guess it's not really all that relevant because this will be the version that's replacing it. But yeah, so the Lurker in the Deep, this has a more focused flavor than the Sorcerer subclass. It doesn't really touch psionics at all. Instead, it's talking specifically about a character that has made a deal or is in service to either like an aboleth or a kraken, a creature of the deep. So sort of still Lovecraftian in a sense, but it's not so much Cthulhu as it is, I forget what the other one is, the one where he talks about an island of slime and stuff. Which is pretty, it's pretty cool because there already is like an aberration-specific Warlock subclass. That's a great old one. So this needs to distinguish itself from that, and I think this is a decent way of doing it, like an ocean-based one. This would have been really good to have in Ghosts of Saltmarsh. I think it's got a lot of flavor that overlaps, but, we'll take what we can get. So let's have a look. Made a pact with an entity that's somewhere in the deep ocean, or even the elemental plane of water. So they get an expanded spell list, like most Warlocks do. You don't immediately learn these spells, they're just added to the spell list and you can select them if you want. First level ability, Grasp of the Deep. You gain the ability to magically summon a spectral tentacle that strikes at your foes. As a bonus action, you can create a 10-foot long tentacle. At a point you can see within 60 feet of you, it lasts for a minute until you create a tentacle. This tentacle deals a d8 cold or lightning damage, and once the creature is hit with it, its speed is reduced by 10 feet until the start of its next turn, increasing as you go up in levels. As a bonus action on your turn, you can move the tentacle 30 feet and repeat the attack. You can summon a number of tentacles, or you can summon a tentacle a number of times equal to your charisma modifier, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So you can still only have one tentacle up at once. You can't just have multiple. I think this is a really cool ability. It's basically like a slightly weaker spiritual weapon that doesn't cost you a spell slot, which is useful because Warlocks have their short rest spell slot recovery. So by using this, it frees up the spell slot they might otherwise use for something like Spiritual Weapon or Hex for other damage or utility spells, while still allowing them to function in combat quite well. And because it's a combat ability, it contrasts against the distinctly not combat / roleplay of the Great Old One, which, is good to distinguish its flavor. I like it, the damage is decent. The fact that it does cold or lightning damage is cool. When I was discussing this with my friends, they said it's kind of weird that it doesn't deal... Oh, is that a ghillie? Hey, ghillie. Bludgeoning damage, yeah. Bludgeoning damage, that's in there. Or magical bludgeoning damage, which, I do kind of agree with. I do see that. But at the same time, cold or lightning damage would be what most people would use anyway. It's just kind of neat to put bludgeoning damage in there for the thematics of it, I suppose. Would you say that's correct, Rowan?
I know that it's very tied lightning damage to the Kraken. However, it's not in their tentacle attack. It's a very different way which they do their lightning damage.
You could just say the tentacle's coated in lightning, or it's like coated in cold.
I mean, I guess. I don't have too much of a problem with the ability. It's ultimately cool. It's going to amp the damage a fair bit when you're Eldritch Blasting, then bonus actioning, smacking them with a tape.
I think the damage is about slightly more than a Hex. Like, because most Warlocks would use Hex anyway to boost up the damage.
Or you can do it with Hex.
You can combine them with Hex, but it's two bonus. It's and Hex and the tentacle. I was aware that was going to be my next point. But it's just that's a lot of setup, and you have to use your bonus action with Hex to swap it to a new creature, which means you can't be using your bonus action to attack in the same turn. So it makes you very bonus action dependent. It makes you very bonus action dependent.
I think it's balanced. It's fine.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like it. It's just I saw some people comparing it to Spiritual Weapon and thinking that it's nowhere near as good, and I'm like, no, it doesn't cost a spell slot. It still does damage. You can move it. It's a bonus action. It's like it's related to Spiritual Weapon, but it's not like a weaker form of it or anything.
No.
Yeah. Thank you for your input.
Yeah.
So their next first level ability is Scion of the Deep. That was my roommate, by the way. Scion of the Deep. So at first level, your patron accepts you into your inner court of servitors. You can telepathically communicate with any aberration, beast, elemental, or monstrosity that has an innate swimming speed while within 120 feet of the creature. It can understand you and can respond telepathically. This is one of my favorite abilities from both of these subclasses, because you can talk to sharks, you can talk to cools, you can talk to anything that has a swimming speed, piranhas, plesiosaurs. It's even like weird, like oozes. Do oozes have a swim speed? I don't know. Hey, Gilly, do you want to come up here? Hello. I'm going to get distracted by the cat now. But yeah, so this is a good example of a telepathy ability that is incredibly thematic. No other class, to my knowledge, can speak to just every creature that's got a swimming speed, basically, especially weird alien creatures that don't have a language. The importance is that it doesn't have a language, and you can still communicate with it. Not just through, like, gestures and communicate simple ideas. It can hear you and respond telepathically. So I guess it's up to the DM to figure out how a shark would communicate back to the deep. What is it called? The Lurker in the Deep Warlock character. But I think it's really cool, and because it's something that is unique to this subclass, it makes it stand out. And that it's an ability like this that the Sorcerer is lacking, something that is really cool and unique to them that other classes don't really have or don't touch. So yeah, immediately I think this subclass starts off stronger flavor-wise than the Sorcerer subclass. At 6th level, they get Fathomless Sol. So you can breathe both air and water, gain a swim speed equal to your walking speed, and resistance to cold damage. Not much to say here. I think this is fairly self-explanatory. I think these are abilities that you would expect a deep sea based character to have. But they also get a second 6th level ability, Guardian Grasp, using the tentacle that you created with Grasp of the Deep. At 1st level, you can now use it to defend yourself or your allies. So when they get hit by an attack, any attack, you can use your reaction to halve all the damage from that attack. If you do, the tentacle disappears. The interesting thing is, and what's worth talking about, is that Fathomless Sol and Guardian Grasp both come at 6th level, and no other Warlock subclass, to my knowledge, gets 2 abilities at 6th level. So in the D&D Beyond video where Jeremy Crawford talks about this UA and the 2 subclasses, which I'm really glad that D&D Beyond /Wizards are doing videos like that, because it allows us to get an insight into the creator's design process, which I find really interesting. He said that when they're designing subclasses, they do it holistically, to paraphrase him, and that it doesn't really matter symmetry in terms of like every subclass should get 2 abilities here, 1 ability here, 1 ability here, 1 ability here. Doesn't matter the amount of abilities they get, as long as all those abilities at a certain level are balanced against each other. So looking at Fathomless Sol and Guardian Grasp, even though they're 2 separate features, if you added those 2 separate features together, are they as strong or stronger than the features that the other Warlock subclasses get? And I think, yes, I think potentially these two together are more powerful than other Warlocks would get at this level. That's not a big deal, though. Like, you know, you can't have everything being perfectly balanced. I don't think these two together are significantly more powerful than any other ability that subclasses get. I think it's just, you know, maybe added together, they're more powerful than the standard, which is fine. But I bring this up more as a note for general homebrew principles. A lot of people saw this, I think, and saw that, you know, the Sorcerer subclass as well got an odd amount of features compared to the standard, and were like, oh, that's not a good thing, you need to be obeying the rules. No, there's no strict rules when it comes to the amount of features that a class can get. And I think the idea that that is the case comes from the fact that a lot of bad homebrews that people see online just involve the classes getting a ridiculous amount of abilities or an odd amount of abilities that are too powerful. Or getting like 3 abilities at first level. Each of those features could be a single feature for that subclass by itself. And the power is just too much. So people are like, oh no, you shouldn't break the amount, the set amount of features that a class or subclass should get at that level. As long as you need to look at all the features and that character and everything that character would have at that level compared to its likeness in order to determine balance, not an honestly arbitrary number of features that they get. Now, at 10th level, they get an ability called Devouring Maw, which is probably my favorite ability that in this document. I said Scion of the Deep was one of my favorites. This is my favorite. Starting at 10th level, you can magically draw forth a manifestation of your patron's insatiable hunger. As an action, you choose a point you can see within 60 feet of you, and a giant maw that is representative of your creature's of your patron's hunger appears on the ground. They need to succeed a strength saving throw or be restrained by these jaws. I get sort of very much gluttony from Full Metal Alchemist, or just a kind of Full Metal Alchemist vibe from this, of just this yawning abyss of hunger opening up beneath you. The creatures need to succeed in a strength saving throw or be restrained. Any creature that starts its turn in the Maw's area takes 3d6 cold or lightning damage, your choice when it takes the damage. So you can have some of your Maw some of the creatures take lightning and some of the creatures take cold, which is interesting. As an action, a restrained creature can repeat the saving throw, ending the restraint on a success. At the start of your turn, if there is a creature in the Maw's area, you gain temporary hit points equal to the Warlock level. Once you use this feature, you can't do so until you finish a short or long rest. Honestly, I think this ability would be fine as a long rest ability. As a short rest ability, it's fucking fantastic. If you use this, it's got a pretty decent AoE of a 10 foot radius. No, 10, I thought it was 20 foot. 10 foot radius. It's, that's nothing to laugh at. And if you can get a bunch of minions that don't have a lot of strength in that radius, and you just keep sucking their life force and eating them, dealing this damage, and chewing them up, that would be, you could have a pretty decent source of temp HP. But then again, also, if you have a whole bunch of minions in there, your damage might kill them pretty early on. So you might be better to grab a big monster, but big monsters generally have good strength. So I'd have to see it in players to see how powerful it actually is, but I just love the aesthetic. I think the flavor is really cool, and the mechanics and the flavor work together really well. So Devouring Maw is a mince ability. Temporary hit points don't stack, so yeah, you can't go 20 and then 40 and then whatever temporary hit points. You can just, it means that you can wade into combat, take some damage, get the 10 hit points back, gain some damage, get the 10 hit points back, and if not, it's still just a decent form of damage. At 14th level, Unleash the Depths. Starting at 14th level, you gain the ability to call upon your patron for aid. As an action, you can choose a point within 30 feet of you where you and your patron, where your patron tears through reality, manifesting a measure of its tholastic grandeur. Tholastic grandeur is a phrase I had never heard before. Tholastic just means ocean or sea-based. So it's basically just like ocean-based grandeur. But it's fun hearing words that you didn't realize existed. And I will now use that. So you choose one of the following effects to issue from this manifestation point, and this can be either Transport or Fury. So the Transport ability is like a teleport, where you and up to 5 willing creatures of your choice, from where you summon the tentacles, are yanked through your patron's realm and teleported to anywhere within 100 miles that you have visited in the past 24 hours, and the tentacles then vanish. A few weird things about this. So It's weird that it's 100 miles, but you still have to have visited it within the last 24 hours. So it's not just a free teleport. That's a bit limiting, but it's fine. The other weird thing is that you are yanked through your patron's realm. See the realm of the Kraken where your patron lives, or like the far realm if you're an Aberrant or something. Like, do you have to do sanity saves? Do you and your party have to do sanity saves for that? Or is it just like a Doctor Strange thing where you're just yanked through this psionic or psychedelic dream? I don't know. It's cool though. And then the Fury ability you get. You direct a barrage of spectral tentacles to issue forth and strike up to 5 creatures you can see within 30 feet of the manifestation point. Each creature must make a dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, taking 6d10 cold damage or lightning damage and knocked prone. And then half and not knocked prone on a save. Look, as a final ability, this is cool. It's a teleport, which, is sometimes hard to come by. It is, a 14th level ability though? Yeah, 14th level ability. Yeah, it's a 14th level ability, but there's some decent damage to up to 5 creatures, knocking them prone. And it's a long rest ability, though. See, I would have expected this and the Devouring Maw to be swapped. That be a long rest, this be a short rest. But in saying that, this is some very decent damage, and teleporting on a short rest is a very powerful ability. I think it's fine. I think it's really cool. I think the Tholastic grandeur of it is pretty cool. But all up, yeah, I really like the, what is it called now? Lurker of the Deep, Warlock subclass. I think it has a more distinct, more precise flavor than the Sorcerer subclass. I think its abilities are more concise and more tie into that distinct flavor than the Sorcerer's does. Again, not saying the Sorcerer is bad. I do like the Sorcerer. I just think that it needs more unique abilities and some rewording when it comes to its flavor text. Last thing we'll talk about is the new spell, the psionic themed cantrip, Mind Sliver. So this is when you summon, I'm just going to make sure I'm recording still. Yeah, cool. So using this spell, it's a 1-action cantrip, and you drive a disorientating spike of psychic energy into the mind of one creature you can see within range. It must make an intelligence saving throw, taking a d6 psychic damage on a failure, and having its next saving throw it makes before the end of your next turn reduced by a d4. Which is, I've always been very wary of cantrips. I've seen a few of them before that reduce saving throws. Because reducing from a target saving throw is incredibly powerful. Just look at Lawbard. That's one of the main reasons that they are as powerful as they are, along with magical secrets, or additional magical secrets. They can use their cutting words to reduce the bardic inspiration from a creature's saving throw. What do I think of this cantrip? I think I need to see it in play. Because it's an action to cast, and then it's not just your spell, it's any target must make a saving throw is successful, take a d6 psychic damage. So it's any saving throw, it doesn't just have to be your spell. So you can use this to set up. If the saving throw doesn't just have to be a spell saving throw, it's any saving throw. So it could be a saving throw against a feature or something. So if it's a big undead, or I don't know, like an aberration or something, and you got a cleric or some other creature that you want to turn, or you got some spell that another member of your party really wants to get off, then you can use this to make it easier for them to do that, significantly easier, if they fail that intelligence save. Of course, otherwise you've wasted your turn, but that's as per normal cantrips. A d4 is not too big, it's decent though. Look, I need to see it in play. I think it's got potential. A d6 isn't too much damage. A d4 is the lowest you could probably reduce from a saving throw, other than obviously like a 1 or something, but I'm not sure the cantrip would be worth it at that point. Yeah, I'll be interested in seeing how it plays out. I'm going to have to cut this short, unfortunately, because my computer is saying it's running out of space, so I'm not sure how much longer I can record for, and I seem to be rambling on. So if you like this video and you like this format of the workshop quickie, or whatever I end up calling this, it'll be in the title of the video, let me know, and I'll do more of them, because I can obviously go through the previous Fey Barbarian and other subclasses, the Fey Barbarian and the Astral Monk subclasses. But I can also go through other UAs or whatever Wizards puts out, because this is easier than me scripting an entire video, but we'll see how much, if it actually comes out as anything, because I feel like I've been rambling a lot. The power of editing. If you think I've missed anything, if you disagree with me, leave it in the comments down below. If you like the format and you like the channel, just feel free to, or please subscribe and like the video. Other than that, I'm the Innkeeper, and thank you for staying with us here at the Dungeon Inn.